Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the webinar series Tinkercad Teachers, brought to you by Autodesk. Our topic today is sparking future makers in your classroom, and we're going to be talking about that through the context of project-based learning and also integrating cool skills in learning electronics. So let's get started. All right, so how to participate. On the right side of your trusty screen, you should see a chat window that allows you to both ask questions and also you can comment as well. We're always interested in hearing what you're thinking as we are presenting. That is the joy of a live webinar broadcast. We also do have our team Tinkercad out in sunny San Francisco there to answer your questions in real time. So please, if at any point you get confused, we're here to help you. And we also will have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar today so that we can go deeper with some of your questions. If you fall behind, so at one point today, we have a very exciting demo that's going to happen that you might want to follow along, but don't get stressed out if you're following along and you fall behind because this is being recorded, so you can watch it again. In about a week or so, you will be receiving an email with a link to the recording, and also you'll be getting a lot of resources as well that go along with this very interesting topic. I just wanted to share with you also, this is the URL for our earlier episodes. This is episode 5 in our series for Tinkercad Teachers. So we do encourage you, if you haven't checked out our earlier episodes, to go back and watch them. We think they're pretty cool. Who are we? My name is Kellyanne Mahoney, and I'm a National Board Certified Teacher. I spent 13 years teaching in the Boston Public Schools before I joined Autodesk as Youth Program Specialist in July. I do hold a very fancy master's degree in education, and I'm very happy to introduce our other guests today. So first off, we have Becky Stern. So Becky is going to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. I am a content creator at Instructables in Autodesk and currently working on some cool Arduino electronics learning materials for Tinkercad Circuits. I have in my life published hundreds of DIY tech tutorials about Arduino, wearable electronics, and lots of other stuff. And I'm also a part-time faculty member at a School of Visual Arts master's program here in New York called Products of Design. And I'm looking forward to sharing a demo of Tinkercad Circuits with you later in the webinar.
Very exciting. And if electronics is a big learning curve for you as a teacher, don't get stressed out. We have some experts here that are clearly ready and excited to help you. So Becky is super great, and she's going to be presenting a demo of Tinkercad Circuits later. We also have Nisha, who's going to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Nisha McCrae. I'm the founder and executive director of Bajika. And Bajika may sound like a strange word, but it's pronounced Bajika. It means idea. Why do you ask? Just ask my mother, who kind of forced me one summer to pick up a spare language at the library. And I was that very curious kid who decided Kimbudu, a West African language, is the one I wanted to pick up. But long story short, pretty much my organization is Bajika. We're a global nonprofit that was founded on MIT campus. And we're dedicated to diversifying young people's access to making and turning their ideas into reality, whether that's taking old or new technologies like digital fabrication in order to tackle the challenges we face today. Currently, Bajika is focused on exploring and providing many learning opportunities for students around the world, whether it's tackling challenges that are traditional to STEM education or tackling them in other places around the world, where it may not just be how do you get up in the morning or improving quality of life, but making sure that you can help a neighbor or what have you. Recently, we've launched our initiative MLab, which is short for Bajika Laboratory, and it allows for us to create more innovative curriculum focused on how do we tackle, let's say, more unusual challenges, not just the global warming type, but perhaps how would you outfit the ruler of Wakanda or T'Challa of Black Panther? And this is just a little snapshot of a couple of the outcomes we have in our workshops. As you can see, we're very heavy users of particular Autodesk product, alongside of using some very traditional methods. One of my favorite photos in this shot is you can see one of the students is relearning one of the traditional things my mom taught me, which is how to use a sewing machine. But the outcomes of our workshops are phenomenal, and I would love to share a little bit of our learnings, and especially about a collaboration we did with NewView recently. What is NewView? Who's the person I collaborated with? I guess her name is Rosa. Want to take it away, Rosa?
Sure. Great. So my name is Rosa Weinberg. I'm a licensed architect. I worked as an architect for 5 years, and then I quit my job and I began teaching at NewView Studio. So what is NewView? NewView is a full-time innovation school for middle and high school students in Central Square in Cambridge. It was founded in 2010 by David Wang, Sabagole, and Saeed Arita. It came out of Saeed's PhD thesis, which was on teaching the architectural studio model to middle and high school kids. We work at the intersection of design and engineering. And I personally teach studios that range from studios, co-design studios that focus on disability to studios that focus on fashion. And I do everything in between, including miscellaneous studios like the one I did with Netia very recently. So students come to us full time. They're with us, they leave their school and they come to us for at least a trimester. You'll meet a couple of those students in a little bit. We also, for kids who can't come to us during the year, we have a summer program for middle school students at NewView in Central Square. And then we're doing a program at MIT for high school students. So this is our full year academic program.
Right. And back to Tinkercad. And for some of you out there who are more familiar with our Tinkercad 3D modeling interface, this might be new to you. And today we're really excited to actually introduce you to a whole new world of Tinkercad inside your Tinkercad browser. So to access circuits, you can find it right in your Tinkercad homepage. It's just right below where you go to 3D modeling. And within this new world of Tinkercad, you're able to create electronic prototypes that you can simulate. You can also use blocks-based code or text to create a prototype using Arduino. You also can even take some of the designs that you've made in the 3D modeler and change them up and put in circuit assemblies in order to make them glow and vibrate and do all sorts of cool stuff. So we are very excited today to introduce you to this new world of Tinkercad if you have not explored it yet already. And you have a wonderful, wonderful host with Becky, who's going to be sharing that with you later. All right, so what are we going to learn today? Lots of cool stuff. First off, we're going to talk about how we can demystify electronics by designing opportunities for students to play with wires, microcontrollers, LEDs, and sensors, both virtually and in real life. We also will talk about how you can inspire students to improvise and engineer solutions to authentic problems using common materials. We even have real life students with us today. So we're very excited for them to present as well. We also are going to think about how you can integrate an engineering mindset into your students' everyday problem solving. And we can also extend that to a design mindset too. Lots of cool stuff going on today. So our agenda, to begin, we are going to talk about teaching electronics. So Rosa and Netia are going to talk about their very exciting Neighborhood Marvels project that doesn't only integrate electronics, it integrates social studies, it integrates social justice, it integrates all sorts. It's like a beautiful stew of making that we are going to be presenting to you today. And I'm super excited about it. So beginning with thinking about teaching. And then we're also going to talk about learning electronics. So we're going to be hearing from the students who did this really super awesome project that I don't want to give too much away because you guys want to present it, but it's very cool and you're going to love it. For part 3, you're going to try it out yourself. And this is where our friend Becky comes in and she is going to take you into the circuits editor in Tinkercad and she's going to show you around and you're going to love it. So that's our agenda today. This is just my special public service announcement for my teacher friends that are out there. I'm thinking of my buddies who've been sticking around with the 3D modeling in Tinkercad and might be totally freaked out with this new idea of diodes and batteries and electricity and breadboards and oh my goodness, I don't know what you're talking about. One thing that I just wanted to say to you out there that are worried about electronics is that you don't need to be a pro in order to have fun and actually make something cool with electronics. Just like playing professional basketball is really hard. You can still play basketball as like a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old and have fun and do something cool without being a professional. So that's my public service message. You got this, guys. You can do it. Another just kind of thing I wanted to point out in terms of learning electronics and thinking like an engineer is in many ways it kind of dovetails with what you're already doing when you're teaching students about habits of mind like curiosity, open-mindedness, resilience, resourcefulness, collaboration, reflection, and ethical consideration. When you're teaching in this way, so teaching electronics as a project, you're instilling engineering habits of mind, like systems thinking, adapting, problem finding, creative problem solving, visualizing, and improving. And the source of this graphic is actually the Royal Academy of Engineering. You're also teaching students how to think like a designer. So at this point, we're going to switch back over to Nisha and Rosie, or Rosa, and they're going to explain to you their project that integrates all these really cool interdisciplinary skills together.
Great, thank you. So Nisha and I met a year and a half ago at the Boston Mini Maker Fair. NewView had a booth there, as did Bajika. And we started talking about teaching together, and it took a little bit of time, but we got together and we put together a 3-week curriculum, and then a little bit later we got to pilot it at NewView with our students. So
I would say the concept for the studio, which is what NewView calls its workshops or experiences for its students, came together right in the middle of what we call the double whammy of Marvel movies. Black Panther had just come out, and we were thinking about how could we do a studio that explored the neighborhoods of Boston or greater Boston and show that there's challenges that face each neighborhood, but how do we work together no matter where we come from in unity, just like in Marvel's Avengers Infinity War. And please, no spoilers, there's some of us here who haven't seen it. But in terms of the studio curriculum, we wanted to figure out how can we have students get that experience. So we thought, who are the Marvels in our own neighborhoods? And that's how we came up with Studio Neighborhood Marvels. As you can see here that we have 5 neighborhoods that we picked: Jamaica Plain, Roxbury, Chinatown, East Boston, as well as
Cambridge.
Cambridge. How did I forget Cambridge?
We're in Cambridge.
So through this 3-week studio or workshop, students worked with 5 different neighborhood marvels. They worked with Dr. Avik Chatterjee, who works for Healthcare for the Homeless. They also worked with Malia Lazu. Malia Lazu's organization, Urban Labs, helps to diversify organization and companies. And then they also worked with Dr. Lydia Villakamarov. She is the 3rd Latina woman to get her PhD in the sciences in the US.
Our 4th neighborhood model hails from Chinatown. He's the director of the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center. Giles Lee actually leads a lot of the efforts to preserve the Chinatown neighborhood in regards to access to English as a second language classes, general resources for students going to school, and the gentrification crisis happening in downtown Boston. Our last but not least superhero hails from East Boston, and this is Sandra Nihar. Sorry, forgive my pronunciation, Nihar, who actually runs the East Boston Community Soup Kitchen and pilots a lot of work in order to give access to a lot of men who are unable to find housing, etc.
So we didn't interview this. The students came up with interview questions and they interviewed the marvels. So on the 1st or 2nd day, this is a picture of Dr. Avik Chatterjee, and the students are writing notes on their interview with him. The students found out sort of what the Marvel's gifts were or what their personal story was, and then used those ideas to create wearables or devices that would express those gifts. And just like a superhero has their sort of swag, so we wanted to make swag for our Marvels.
So this actual image is an illustration of, I don't know if there's some Doctor Strange fans in the audience, but this is supposed to be a remake of the Eye of Agamotto with Dr. Avik Chatterjee.
This is the one for Malia Lazu. And this was for Giles Lee so that he could share some of his thoughts in a broadcast way. This is for Sandra Nihar, East Boston. And then last but not least, this was the project that was made for Dr. Lydia Villakamarov. And to talk about this project, we have 2 students here. Come on over, guys. So these 2 students, they've been with us for about a little over a month, and they go to one of our partner schools, and they will be here for another month and a little bit. They're about halfway through, and they're going to talk to you a little bit about their project. So Maggie and Alec, take it away.
Hi, I'm Becky. I'm a junior at Beaver Country Day School.
I'm Alec. I'm also a junior at Beaver Country Day School.
And we created this project, this device for Dr. Lydia Villakomarov. She's a very notable molecular biologist due to the fact that she's the third Hispanic woman to ever earn a PhD in hard sciences in the United States. She also created, co-founded a group called SACNAS, which is designed to SACNAS, which is designed to push Native Americans and Latinx towards hard sciences. She spoke a lot about implicit bias, and she also talked a lot about her favorite science tool, which is a Geiger counter. This tool is used to detect radioactivity, and she also spoke about her love for butterflies. We were very interested in how butterflies can magically go from Mexico to Canada and stay on track for up to 3,000 miles. So it was very interesting. And so we wanted to incorporate both of those into a project, implicit bias, three of those, implicit bias, Geiger counter, and the butterflies. So these were the prototypes we first made for her. And then we further improved those prototypes. So I was casually walking from Chipotle, and I landed upon this wonderful, wonderful brick. And inside the brick was this great chemical called braggadocious. And I thought, I should probably incorporate that into the wings, which is the project we decided to go forward with. So do you want to talk more about that?
So the development of the wings was an interesting process, and this right here is a diagram of the final wings and how they should work. So the braggadocious, the rare chemical that we discovered on the streets of Cambridge, is actually implemented into the very spine of the device and helps both connect the device to the user and detect implicit bias and stereotyping going on wherever the user may be. Once the device detects any implicit bias or stereotyping, the wings begin to flutter and the spine begins to light up. And Lydia, or whoever is using the device at the time, is immediately notified of what type of implicit bias, what type of stereotyping is occurring around her, and how she can stop it.
And using the wings, so instead of designing the wings to be clearly butterfly wings, we decided to go along and make the design of the veins of the butterfly wings. These wings are supposed to take in the implicit bias and convert them to positivity. Basically. And then
so we used Fusion to create most of the 3D renderings for our spine and our wings. And here's a diagram of how the spine would fit together and the electronics that we're working on under the spine. So under the spine, there's a strip of LED lights that we programmed with an Arduino to light up and change colors steadily. And you can see it behind us right there. The diagram, there you go.
And then
more. There you go.
Fancy.
So working with the LED lights was probably one of the most exciting parts of it because one, I've never worked with LED lights. So seeing how one, we could change the colors using the code and being able to work with a board and making something light up is exciting overall. Another exciting part would have to be the process of coming up with an idea, because we came up with some ridiculous ideas at first and then eventually came up with these butterfly wings. One of the most ridiculous ideas we had was a backpack that had limbs coming out of it, which we couldn't have done, but with what we had available, but that was probably one of the most exciting parts.
Yeah, and I think for me, most of the work that we did beyond hand prototyping with cardboard and cutting materials that we had was done in Fusion. And for me specifically, I had done some work with Fusion before, But this was a really great experience for me, mostly because I got to learn a lot about specifically 3D rendering and 2D rendering as well. And everything from cardboard to acrylic cutting to 3D printing from there, we did in Fusion, and I learned an incredible amount. So I think that was one of my favorite parts about this.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
And I want to reiterate, in thinking of my teacher friends out here that might be intimidated by doing a project like this, is that a lot of times I think, and it's nice to have students here to ask this question or to make this point, is that in teaching electronics, I think sometimes students get bored if everyone is doing the same thing at the same time. Whereas with this project, what I thought was really cool about it is you're all working on something that's on the same theme, but you're all doing different things. Like you're using the same skills, you're trying to solve problems, you're trying to, engage in with your community, but you're doing it in different ways. What were some of the cool things that you saw other students making, and what were you surprised by?
Well, a pair of students obviously made the Eye of Agamotto, and that was really cool to see come into real life, because I saw it at least in the movies, and to see a group of students that were learning the same thing as me use their knowledge in a different way and come up with something that I've only seen in movies and sort of bring it to life like that was really cool.
For me, it definitely had to be the crown. For Amalia, because we also used LED lights. They used LED lights, but they were so different. At first I was afraid, oh my gosh, we're all using LED lights. How is this going to work out? They're all going to be the same. But seeing it come to life, and when she wore it, she looked so beautiful with the crown. It was very nice seeing how everyone took in the interest and the personalities of the people they were working with, and us as well, and putting it together and completing these devices.
It's really cool and very inspiring. So thank you so much.
It was very cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Are we going to do musical chairs again?
Yeah.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank
Thank you. All right, so next, we are going to move into the try it yourself phase. But before we do that, I just wanted to let you know that we are thinking about you teachers in terms of making you're learning right now, but we also want you to be able to get credit for your learning. So maybe you're using this webinar as part of your evaluation. And I know in many states, as part of your evaluation, you need to create artifacts that make your learning visible. So for each of the Tinkercad teacher episodes, we've come up with just some ideas, and you can come up with your own as well. But these are just a few ideas that you can do to extend your learning in order to make your learning visible. So for example, after this webinar, you might want to go on and complete a free Instructables Arduino class. Becky's going to talk about that a little bit, but one way that you can show that you did it is by screenshotting when you've completed the class. We also have 4 free interactive Tinkercad Circuits Arduino lessons that you can go through, and that also has a way of showing on your dashboard that you've completed the lessons. Screenshot that away and send it off to your department head and show them what you've learned, and maybe even teach them about electronics in Tinkercad. Or you might even design a project or lesson inspired by neighborhood marvels. So even thinking out there to teachers that maybe are history teachers or English teachers that maybe want to team up with some of the STEM teachers in your building to do a big interdisciplinary project. That'd be super cool. Also, we don't want to forget that we are going to be issuing you a certificate. So when you get that exciting email a week from now with the link to the webinar on YouTube, you also will be getting some additional resources to help you extend your learning. And we also want to celebrate your participation with this certificate. On this certificate, it says that you've completed 2 hours of professional development, which means that this webinar generally runs about an hour long, and you're engaging in that right now. But we do expect that if you're using their certificate, that you've extended your learning in some way, in the way that we've suggested, or maybe you have your own way of doing it too. And we're excited to hear about that as well. So without further ado, we are going to be switching it over to Becky, who is going to take us inside the world of Tinkercad Circuits for us to explore. So Becky, I think, has the screen now.
I do have the screen. Thank you very much, Kellyanne, for that lovely introduction. So here's the Tinkercad Circuits dashboard page. I obviously have a lot of have created a lot of circuit designs, and you can see that here, but it's just a tab over from your 3D designs. And now this was introduced into Tinkercad last year sometime, and this simulator that we'll be going through was actually part of a different piece of software that was integrated into Tinkercad relatively recently. So don't feel bad if you haven't seen it yet or haven't had a chance to play around with it. That's what I'm here to tell you about today. So when you go in to create a new circuit, I just want to show you around a little bit so you know where to find things, and then I'll show you some example circuits. So you start off with a blank canvas here, and yeah, sure, you can drag components here, but if you don't know where to get started, we've offered some Arduino circuit starters. So if you navigate in the components dropdown to the Arduino starters panel, you can see it starts you off with all of these different circuits. So if you want to do NeoPixels, which I believe the students in their project with the butterfly wings were using these WS2812 LEDs, also known as NeoPixels, you can just drag the circuit starter into the work plane and start playing around with it. Anytime you want to run your circuit, you can click this button up at the top corner called Start Simulation, and it'll run the included code that came with the circuit starter. So Arduino boards are they're a small microcontroller. You can think of it like the computer brain inside your coffee maker, for instance. It's designed to just take inputs from buttons and send outputs to displays. And with that ecosystem, Arduino is it's an open source ecosystem that was designed by some educators at a design school in Italy in 2005 to make electronics learning easy for designers and novices and self-learners and young students so that they could get a grasp on this stuff. So it's not designed for pros, it's designed for beginners, and I'll just remind you of that. And then when you want to look at the code that's running on any of these circuit starters, for instance, it's lighting up these NeoPixels in different colors, all you have to do is click the code button over here and it'll open up the code panel. What you're looking at here is some standard Arduino code, but don't be intimidated by all of the different syntax. We have an easier way for students to learn very beginner coding, and that would be with code blocks. So I'll switch over to a circuit here that I've already designed and built some code out for. It's just an ultrasonic distance sensor. So it's using the same kind of echolocation bats use. It's sending out a little audio signal and then receiving the audio signal back and timing how long that transaction takes to occur. And with that information can establish the distance of an object away from it. So in the simulator, you can see that this bluish green object is representing your hand or your body in front of the sensor. And down here on the lower right of the screen, you can see the serial monitor, which is like the way that the Arduino board sends information out for you to be able to read like what the sensor's seeing and thinking. So right here I have the distance being read out to the serial monitor here in centimeters and inches. And while a simulation is running, you can see that I can move the object and it'll change the measurement on the sensor. And then I have this program set up as sort of a like a proximity alarm. So the 3 LEDs in the circuit are going to light up according to how close you are. And the closer you are, the bigger the alert. So as I move the object closer and closer, you can see that it's lighting up one or more of the LEDs to indicate like, whoa, back off. So as you can see, these brightly colored objects up here look a lot different than the code that I showed you on the last circuit. And yet you can look at them side by side, which is great. These code blocks are from the Scratch system of learning coding, and they're an easy way to drag bits of code around without having to worry about, did I remember to put a semicolon at the end of the line, or like what do all of these different functions mean? It's just like an easier way to write the same code. With that, I'll just briefly go through what this program is doing so that you're not scared of it, because it looks a little bit long, but you can see that the text code isn't really that long. The blocks just take up a lot of space, and I swear it's really simple. Let's go through it together. At first, there's just a comment block. That's so that you can have some human readable language around the code to remind you of what it's doing. Very helpful. And the first thing it's doing is setting the distance you want to detect. And I created a variable called distance threshold to do that. And you can create new variables here in the variables panel. And I just set like 101 centimeters is the distance I wanted to set as how close is too close. And then I'm going to measure that, measure the distance from the sensor with this purple block that says read ultrasonic distance sensor on pin 7. And if I zoom into my circuit here, you can see that the data pin is plugged in to pin 7. Then I'm going to convert it to inches, and then these blue blocks here say print to serial monitor, and then they print the centimeters and the inches. And then I'm going to make some decisions based on that reading. So once I have the distance coming in from the sensor, it's useful to be able to make decisions. And so this orange block here is an if statement. And what an if statement does, it just says, if a condition is met, enter the loop. If not, skip down to the next thing. So I'm going to evaluate whether the distance in centimeters is greater than the distance threshold. And if it is, it's going to set all of the LEDs to low, which is Arduino's way of saying off. And that's the off state. So the object is too far away. It's more than 100 and whatever my threshold was. It's more than 101 centimeters away. So leave all the LEDs off. Then the next if statement is where it starts to get interesting. If the distance is less than or equal to, that's what this little guy means. If you remember your, what is that, logic math? If it's less than or equal to the distance threshold, but it's just barely below, and it's also greater than the distance threshold minus 4, so it's within 4 centimeters of the distance threshold, then set 2 of the LEDs off and 1 of them on. High is Arduino's way of saying on. So that's the condition that's going to happen when I bring it just there. Between 101 and 101 minus 4 is what, 97? And then when I come down here, you can see there's 2 more of these statements that are evaluating whether it's like 1 bar away, 2 bars away, or so close that all 3 LEDs should be on. And if that's the case, light them all up, and then just have a little pause at the end, and then the whole thing will repeat. So I know that I went through that kind of quickly, and this is it's a demo that's designed to show off both the input and the output features of Tinkercad Circuits. So don't be intimidated. This right here is the circuit that is similar to the circuit that the students used in their butterfly wings project for Dr. Lydia. And it just has an Arduino Uno board and a strip of addressable LED pixels and the sample code that comes with those LED pixels. So you don't have to go crazy with inputs and outputs and serial monitoring. You can just make a diagram for your static or animating LED project. And the way you connect everything up is you can just drag the components around, and you can click to create wires, and you can change your wire colors to make your circuit more organized. And you can also embed these circuits in your web page tutorial, or you can use it as the circuit diagram in your project documentation, as well as a place to store your code. So when I want it, like say I was working on this with my teammates, say I'm a student with my teammates, I can make changes to the code here, and each of the students can access this public file and just copy all of this code into their Arduino window, or click this download code button to download the Arduino file and open it up in their Arduino software to program their board. So when we're talking, so let me take a step back. Now that I've shown you a couple of the features and you're like, wow, that's cool, but like, whoa, that's scary. This is the Tinkercad Learning page. So when I go to tinkercad.com and I navigate to the Learning tab, I'm going to come here and click on Circuits and then Arduino projects, and you'll be able to find these first LED experiments lessons, which will not only show your completion progress so that you can document your learning from extending it from this webinar today, but also just to get you up to speed. Like, you can go through these lessons before you take your students through them, and it'll show you step by step like how to build the circuit and how to build the code blocks that go with it, as well as showing you the successful sample. So you can you just drag another one from the window here, like right next to it in the work plane, and that's literally how you can go about making it right next to the example with some help along the way in the lesson panel, including showing you how to make the physical version of the circuit. And once I turn off my webcam or my share screen, I will show you a couple of examples. So definitely check out these lessons, but I wanted to show you some of the cool features to get you excited, but also not leave you hanging, and like provide you with lots of resources for learning this at your own pace before you introduce it into your classroom, and show you where to get help and how you can provide a support network for your students in their so they can let their curiosity take flight. I've written this free Arduino class on the Instructables website at instructables.com/classes, and you can step through all of the different basic lessons. You learn basic lessons while you're learning the basic concepts of how a solderless breadboard goes together, like what it looks on the inside, so you can really master teaching that to your students, as well as the same kind of experiments that are in this virtual learning environment in Tinkercad. And this Arduino class experience will, as Kellyanne mentioned, will also show you that you've completed it on the lesson itself. Here you can see that I've completed all of these lessons, but then also when you go to your public Instructables profile, it will put a badge on your profile that says that you've completed that Arduino class. So you can screenshot that and show that to anyone you need to. There's one more cool thing that I want to mention before I turn it back to you guys, and that's the 3D editor electronics component. So we're starting to integrate the circuits with the 3D, and one way that we've done that is by creating these basic circuit assemblies, which are here in the shapes drop down. And what they are basic circuit 3D designs that you can just drop into your designs. This is an LED and a battery holder, and you can see here I've added a couple petals and made it into a flower, and have just recently published this Instructable about creating this glowing LED flower using the glow assembly. So you don't need to know how to 3D model with super tight tolerances and measure your electronics components with calipers when this assembly already provides you with the standard dimensions for those components. So I'd encourage you to check those out too. We also have learning guides for those on the Tinkercad site here in the circuit assemblies section. So I'd look forward to, if I miss anything, I hope you guys will ask questions so that I can answer them during the Q&A session, and would also encourage you to check out the Circuits account on Instructables, which has a lot of the same LED tutorials plus my lovely face in video form walking you through each one of those lessons. So thanks so much for having me on the webinar, and I look forward to answering your questions in a few minutes. Oh wait, I know what I'm gonna do now. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so that you can see my video big, so I can show you the physical version of the LED flower is right there. Yay. And then the physical version of that LED circuit from the lesson is here. It's like a little, it's like a racetrack countdown, right? So go. And then another cool design with the glow circuit assembly, Paige Russell, my colleague, designed is this egg that shines from within with an LED in it here, but little funny little chicken guy. So you can really do a lot with the circuit assemblies and with the circuit simulator, and look out for more lessons coming out from me, like basically through the summer. If you're looking for something cool to do over summer vacation, hit up that Arduino class for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Becky. All right, can we move this? Yeah. So now we are showing our screen. There we go. So clicking through here. Yeah. We got this. All right. So moving through. So just really quickly, because these are such great resources for you to try out yourself and for your students to try out as well, I just made these shortened URLs so you can find them quickly. So if you want to take these down, these will also be in the resources that is sent to you. So you'll get this slide deck as well in the resources, but that is the URL that I made for the Arduino class that's on Instructables. And then here is the URL that I made for the built-in lessons in Tinkercad, so the LED lessons that Becky showed you. So it's just the autode.sk/ it's all in caps LED lessons. So these are great for you to try out, as Becky said, before your students try out. And I think that you, in going through these lessons, will realize that it's just really fun to experiment with new things, and just the satisfaction that you get from the immediate feedback. I remember when my first LED light lit up for the first time, and it was like, it actually worked. I did it right. I didn't need a teacher telling me that I did it right. I knew that it was right because the light lit up. Otherwise, it wouldn't have. So at this point in our episode, we would love to take any questions that you have out there. Before we do that, though, I just also wanted to reiterate how important it is to stay connected. So you can stay connected through us. There's a Tinkercad forum. There's a Tinkercad Help Center. These are all links within the PowerPoints that you will be receiving in that email. We have a Tinkercad Facebook, a Twitter, an Instagram, and we also have some Tinkercad stuff up on Pinterest as well. We know teachers love Pinterest. So without further ado, Kayla, who's been fielding all your questions out in San Francisco, I'm wondering if she has any questions to share for us while we're here.
Yes, hi, we do. A number of people have asked about Arduino and the appropriate age to start introducing these types of projects into the classroom. Someone even said, you know, could you do this as early as kindergarten?
I can speak on that if you guys want. I would say in our Bejica laboratory classes, we've had participants as young as 6 do Arduino. Not to plug any product here, but before all the updates to Tinkercad, Tinkercad Circuits did allow for even our first graders to understand what the circuit board was supposed to look like before they actually went to, we were using Arduino Nanos and LEDs and mini breadboards for them. And them seeing it turn on in Tinkercad Circuits before I gave them their actual materials allowed for them to make that connection between the digital and real life, and actually made it a little bit easier in terms of the safety concerns you would usually have with kindergartners or first graders getting started with Arduino. I would say the coding part, always present it as a recipe, like there's instructions and these are the step-by-step and materials you need. I think the blocks will help with that, but you'll need like a teacher who's very hands-on to explain the code, because that's going to be the huge barrier to entry for them. It won't be actually sticking things into the board.
I totally agree on that, that the code blocks probably brings the intro to Arduino down. And I'm not a K-12 educator, so I'm not like authoritative on the exact age level, but I know that my nephew started learning code at around 10, but I think this brings it down to like maybe 8. And like was mentioned, the code blocks really help visualize what's going on, but like clicking and dragging components, anybody with motor control can do. And so I think there's like an opportunity to level up with a teacher who can explain the code very simply, or maybe, you know, show off the lessons and not have to write the code and just discuss connecting and maybe measuring. There's a bunch of test equipment components inside Tinkercad Circuits, so you can drag a multimeter over and see when the current is flowing and when the current isn't flowing. And you don't have to use Arduino at all. You can actually build a bunch of non-Arduino simulated circuits that don't require any code with a static IC chip, like a 555 timer, for instance, that is like to create an oscillating circuit that would blink LEDs, but doesn't actually run any code. So when you click start simulation, it runs because of its own connections and a battery and a switch and stuff, not because it's sensing the physical environment with a sensor like an Arduino board. So there's definitely different lessons at different skill levels. And if you start with the basic circuits lessons that are on the Tinkercad Learn page, they will introduce you to some basic stuff like Ohm's law and the way batteries work before it's time to learn how to code. So there's lessons along the spectrum for every type of learner. But as Nisha mentioned, the younger you want to start, the more hands-on and knowledgeable the teacher has to be.
I just wanted to add one thing, which is also that all of the different components that you might use with Arduino, there's an example code that you can, Google it and download it and try it out.
Kids become really good at copy and pasting once they discover that hint. They're like, oh, I don't have to do this from scratch. Okay, cool, thanks. But
and it's important to point out that that's how you learn code. You don't learn code by typing it from scratch. You learn code by borrowing bits and pieces from other people. And I hardly ever, when I'm making an Arduino project, write anything from scratch. I take bits and pieces from my projects and other people's projects. And there's a rich culture of open source and sharing and crediting other people for bits and pieces of work throughout Arduino. So it's also interesting socially to teach that concept to kids and young learners. I know I teach a grad class at design school, and they struggle with the intellectual property concepts around sharing code a lot, actually, because they're like, oh, I'm a designer and I make designs and they're proprietary and secret. But in order to learn how to make them interactive, which, more and more products these days are interactive and have electronics inside them and are connected to the internet, coding has a very open source culture, almost like that of fashion, right? Like, replicate, iterate quickly in order to have the hottest new thing.
That was an awesome tangent. Are there any other questions, Gayla?
Yes, everyone's very excited online about this, and there was a question regarding having, working at a K-8 school and having a smaller Arduino class. I'm looking for a lower step, and so just any project ideas that are kind of go-to getting started with younger students.
There's an easy 3D printing class on Instructables, instructables.com/classes. Click on the 3D printing category, and the class called Easy 3D Printing is an introduction to 3D printing in Tinkercad, and has you making a keychain. Oh no, that has no electronics in it. What am I saying? There's the class that's the one you need to know in order to know how to print with Tinkercad. But then after you've taken that one and you know how to set up your printer with Tinkercad, you use the class called 3D printing with electronics, and it is a beginner level 3D printing class that goes through those circuit assemblies that I teased just a little bit. So if you're looking for, and that circuit is just an LED and a battery, so there's really nothing to get wrong, and you're really just incorporating that light source inside a 3D model, and it's a really fun way to bridge the gap and like bring your 3D models to life without a lot of heavy lifting or explaining of code at all. So I would try the circuit assemblies and Paige Russell's 3D printing with electronics class on Instructables to start out.
Other questions, Kayla?
I just think there was a question about identifying community members to work with, and how did you initially approach that with these great superheroes?
That's a great question. So we created sort of a call for superheroes, and we sent it out to lots and lots of people. And I thought it was great.
You even made an email address.
Yeah, I even have a special email address. And nobody responded to that. I think it was really helpful for us to send it out when we approached people, but friends of friends or friends were the best way to do it. So thinking in our lives, who were the people that we really admired. And if we didn't, in East Boston, for instance, it was a friend of a friend of a friend. And a few people mentioned Sandra. And so it was obvious she was a really great person for us to do. But going through friends, I think going through our social networks was a really great way of doing it.
It'd be even cool to have the kids do the research.
Yeah,
too.
That is an awesome idea too. I think having the kids do that, having more time. Nisha and I, for the students, only had 3 weeks. And so we, we had to prepare that beforehand.
It's an awesome project. I can just see other schools replicating it, and you're happy about that, right?
Yes.
Good. Open source, everything.
Have you guys heard of this neighborhood app called Nextdoor, where it's like a community bulletin board for geographically co-located people, and you can select like how wide a net to cast to view posts from, and it's a lot of like, I found a cat, I lost a cat, but I can imagine you could.
I need a superhero. I have to.
Yeah, no, because it's also like free dance class, or like, and in this case, like participate in this community superhero project. I could see it getting some responses. It's a way to filter people just by geography and then ask them a question. So Nextdoor app, not sponsored.
And then they might be able to help find the cat too.
Yes.
Other questions, Kayla?
Just a question on the kind of the frustrations and those hurdles that the students face, and helping them overcome those and through the learning journey.
Wow, what a great question. There are so many. Every day is filled with them. I think just along the lines of the Arduino and electronics question, students and teachers feel very intimidated by the electronics. I hope it's okay for me to give a shout out to Adafruit. If you go to Adafruit and you go to their sensors, the sensors part of their website, you can see all the different sensors that you can buy. They have all of the example code. They have all of the amazing tutorials, some of which I think Becky probably worked on back in the day. And it is an amazing way for the kids to understand like how computers work. That a camera is eyesight, or that a microphone is hearing, or that a touch sensor is, obviously touch. And then there are other things like ultrasonic sensors, which are kind of like sight, but don't see in the same way that we do. That's a really big hurdle. And once I show students Adafruit, they get it. There's a little aha moment.
And I'll say there's also the hurdle of, and even like if you have like an engineering background or designer background, you've always hit the hurdle of when things aren't going right and you know that you have to push through that wall. But a lot of students are used to being in a classroom environment that if they don't get the answer immediately or is not immediately available in a textbook or via a quick Google search, they're immediately like, it's not possible. We need to move on to something else. We need to pivot because I've heard this word before in the design process, and trying to get them to understand, listen, let me show you what my first 5 prototypes of this project look like. And I have an undergraduate degree from MIT. Let me show you what this looks like. And now you can understand why you're not in a bad spot. And humbling yourself as an educator so the students understand that even with your track record, you've been able to still finish projects with your original vision. That wall, I feel like, is one of the greater frustrations we had in the studio, because we had a lot of kids who this was their first time building or making. And a lot of them were used to like having all the answers, or the idea they came up with was like the glorious idea. And it took about that 2.5-week period before they finally went, oh, just push through.
Yeah, and they all had, you know, beautiful projects, but they started off with cardboard and they went through multiple iterations, and that you can't necessarily picture where you're going to be at the end. You need to start sort of really lo-fi and work up to a higher fidelity project.
And I loved how your students also talked about how they just began with the ridiculous. They began with being as imaginative as possible and then kind of went from there. And they felt, and I just feel like that says something to you guys about you guys as teachers, is that you allow them like the space to play and to experiment before getting. I think that would help with the frustration as well.
Well, I think that's all New View, because like, well, I mean, this is an environment that students are able to do that. Like, I think our motto for this workshop was 90% STEAM, like some scientific principle or engineering or math principle to make this work in reality, and then 10% magic. Like, that's the part of the innovation that you may not know exactly how you're going to do it, but that's what you want to portray. So I feel like it's the environment as well. And a lot of educators, you have to figure out how to make your own environment to allow for kids to have that kind of boundless creativity. Like, I even struggle with it in my workshops if I'm in certain locations and we're limited by what a particular organization or educator wants us to do, that the kids are able to hit that wall. But here, I feel like they have that 10% of magic, but that's just me.
Well, I think a lot of magic going on. Learning in a group environment where you can compare your project to like a classmate's project and see that you're all kind of struggling with the same problem-solving problems, right? And so like Kellyanne mentioned at the beginning, learning problem-solving and resilience is a huge part of learning electronics. And so to be able to say, look, this is how engineering works. It's really like your code won't compile because you can't find where there's a single typo. You just have to push through and figure that out, and it won't work until it actually works, and then you're going to get that like amazing feeling. And after you finish the project, you're only going to remember the amazing feeling. You're not going to remember how frustrated you were. But I think learning that that's part of the process is being comfortable being uncomfortable and researching and problem solving through a frustrating element, knowing the answer is out there, and the Arduino community is there to help you, and there's forums where you can post up questions if you get lost, is an important part of the process, because nobody can be a perfect engineer and put together a circuit perfectly the first time and type in every symbol of code perfect every time. So knowing that problem solving is part of the deal is an important step in overcoming frustration.
Other questions, Kayla?
Yes, we have one final question. So it's the reality of many public schools is that teachers only have their students for 1 hour per day and maybe 2 to 3 times per week, and must adhere to learning standards and tests. How can they create a space for tinkering with these constraints?
Sure. Yes, you go. So the reason why I jumped up to answer this question is because I work a lot with Boston Public Schools, and I get this question all the time from educators who are like, oh, it's great that the kids can do this as an after-school program or during vacation programs, but how do they get to experience this in the classroom? I know a lot of the stuff we've talked about, we had 3 weeks in our studio.
5 hours a day.
Right.
3 weeks, 5 hours a day.
So it seems like that's a very tall mountain to climb, especially to give students that amount of bandwidth. I would say even dedicating 15 minutes once or twice a week, in which students know that they're going to have a 15-minute period to create what we call a rapid prototype, which is something that looks like or works like something with the cardboard prototypes that Maggie and Alec had. Those are small steps that may not be the fancy high-tech 3D printers or Arduino boards, but they start that thinking process for students. And if you introduce in those small snippets, what I found with students I've worked with is that once you get them for that hour dedicated to exploring Tinkercad, they already know how to navigate or pivot if they hit a wall and how to explore that software. So there's no perfect magic formula, but even those 15 minutes of just doing prototyping develops that engineering mindset Kellyanne was talking about.
I would also say too, is if you work, a lot of schools, particularly middle schools, teachers work together in teams where you share the same students. So if you can find an administrator and a team of teachers willing to help you get a little bit flexible with the schedule, I mean, that also is something that can lend to kind of more elaborate interdisciplinary projects, but it takes someone with a mind for scheduling as well to figure that all out so that, you know, maybe kids can stay in one place for a day for a particular project and the teachers are moving instead of the students. We did that before when I was teaching in the Boston Public Schools, and it was fun making the schedule for that. That's all I have to say about that.
We've been working with with one public school in Vermont, and we've managed to, they've managed to carve out time in the day. I think it's more than an hour, but it is a shorter block of time. They've been doing projects like we do here.
And I think that like once even the teachers on your team see like how rewarding it is for students to be working in this way and to be working on these like projects that are so engaging and so fulfilling, I think that it's that barrier of like being afraid and being nervous about not being the one in charge and being the expert. I think that that starts to fall away. And when you see students like the students that we saw here talk about, you know, just how meaningful it was for them and to be able to speak so articulately about their process of learning is just really, I think, inspiring and very convincing.
And this may actually be where the Tinkercad electronic tutorials come into play that Becky was showing earlier, because I'm kind of a stalker on Tinkercad because I have to teach a lot of kids under the age of 12, and I'm always trying to find nicer ways to do visuals. So the part I struggle with in the hour block that I usually get is trying to get all the kids set up on trying to find out where's the coin cell battery, where's the LED, where's the breadboard, et cetera, et cetera. Using the circuit assemblies, if you're able to go through and say, in this 15 minutes, we're going to understand a basic LED circuit, that is a godsend, and take advantage of it, just to say.
And keeping it in the Tinkercad editor, it keeps everything clean, it's less messy, it's quick to use.
Yeah, and I would add that if you go along and follow along with those the basic LED lessons in Tinkercad Circuits, you can assign it as homework and say, come in with your finished lesson and let's discuss your questions that you had. You know, so even if you have a short time, the lessons are really they really hold your hand through the whole way, and then provide a finished circuit in your Tinkercad account that you can then show and say, look, I built this.
And then maybe as an English teacher the next day, the students can reflect upon their process and what they learned as well. Shout out to English teachers. Kayla, any other questions, or is that the last one?
That is the last one.
Wow.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you. This was super fun. Thank you, Becky. I wish the students
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kayla, for fielding all the questions. Yeah. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Tinkercad Teachers. We do have one more in store before the school year is over, so we'll be sending you some more information about that in our email. But in the meantime, we would also like to thank Autodesk for making software for people who make things and for helping us share this lesson about Tinkercad and circuits. So please come back again. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.